Okay, so I am going to change the shape of this vase or vase. People like things that are different, so I have found that this flattened form is something that people think is really tough. It's not hard. And this clay, or this vase, is at what we call the leather hard stage. So it is still, I can manipulate it a little bit, not a whole lot, but some. The clay on this, it actually is porcelain. And I like to make these bigger pieces, but this process that I do is called mishima, and there's an end result. Mishima is, I thought it was Korean, but I have read that it is a Japanese technique. So I carve into the clay to make these lines, and I find little curvy lines tend to work best for me. I started out doing the mishima with the idea of cherry blossoms and cherry trees, but I've kind of, that tended to be a little bit too delicate, and I happened to look outside my window and noticed that my sycamore tree does this very same thing. There's a sycamore and also a weeping willow tree, and they both tend to do these lines. So you draw the lines in there, and I can put other designs with that. Sometimes I use stamps. There's a lot of ways to do mishima. You can do it after the clay's been bisque fired. I do like doing it leather hard, and I like using a thicker line. I've seen it done with X-Acto blades, which create a much finer line. But I like to have more underglaze go in these lines because I want the color to run. I want it to have a watercolor effect, and the clear glaze that I use will cause anything that has cobalt in it to run. And as it happens, this blue-green has cobalt in it. It actually looks better if you can do it this way and basically wipe the excess away. It just makes a cleaner line. And that's another thing with the mishima is you can remove it different ways. You can actually scrape it away if you want, or you can use this, what I do, with a sponge. And I usually have a whole bunch of sponges around because they get dirty really fast, and it's best to work top to bottom. Okay, the next thing, I will do the back side, similar design, and then I let it dry. Then it will go through the bisque, and after it's bisque, then I can glaze it, and then it goes through a high fire. So everything gets fired twice. And this clear glaze is real tricky because it is a runny glaze, and it does tend to want to come off the pot, which I don't consider that a flaw as long as the pot is still solid and doesn't have a big gouge out of it. If it has a big gouge, then it's useless. If it's cool to the touch, I've put my bisque firing on a hold cycle for as long as 12 hours, because if you put wet, the one rule in pottery is, and even this can be an exception sometimes, but you don't put wet pots in the kiln. They blow up. It's not air bubbles. Air bubble, it's wet clay. So you've got to make sure that everything's nice and dry. And this is porcelain, so it's kind of persnickety. but it shows, I use porcelain because otherwise I wouldn't have this nice white background that I want to have. So it's a pretty long, drawn out process. It can take, a couple weeks to go through the whole process.